It is an absolute privilege to introduce our next author, Melissa Hekkers. Where to begin with an author like Melissa, a writer who pushes the boundaries of genre and writes in such an elegant and graceful way without sacrificing the truth of what she's writing, which is, I think, one of the highest charges of any writer. She is a writer that I deeply admire, and it has been an absolute pleasure being part of her journey with her piece of creative nonfiction that she began at the Casale Flaminia residency. When we chose her to be resident, she started this there, and it is now in published form, Amir's Blue Elephant, where Melissa shines a light on the European refugee crisis, and also the humanity that unites us all. I would like to read a little bit of her bio just quickly. Melissa is a freelance journalist and author who has frequently been featured in mainstream news outlets and other publications in Cyprus. Her most recent publication, 2020 Amir's Blue Elephant, is her first attempt at creative nonfiction and is based on her experiences as a volunteer working with refugees on the island of Lesbos, Greece. Her third similarly well-received children's book, I'm sort of skipping, published in both Greek and English in 2014, has been adapted as a theater play in 2019. In between her last two books, she published her first free verse poetry book entitled Come Forth. Without further ado, please welcome this incredible author, Melissa.
Thank you, Melissa. Thank you for the introduction.
Yeah.
I think it's funny that you put up your copy of the book, because that's actually the galley, and the cover has changed in its final form. So yeah, that's actually a collector's item. There aren't many out there.
Thanks, Mel.
So nice to see the original draft of it. So I don't know how much time I was given to actually read from the book. I was actually, as you said, in your case, I was trying to find a piece to read that would stand on its own, but that would also give kind of the essence of the book. So I've chosen quite a small excerpt. I think it's about 10 minutes long, but perhaps that will kind of give us the opportunity maybe to talk about it a little bit further. I think there's, it's obviously, I mean, it's a book based on my experiences, and I think one of the biggest challenges in writing this book is because the experience was in a refugee camp, in a very much, you know, in a humanitarian crisis, I would call it, at the time, and addressing this issue, which has been and is highly politicized and kind of, you can see it from so many angles. I think it's that was the hardest, that was the challenge in writing this book. And in the end, I think with your help and with, I mean, I can't express how grateful I am that you are on this journey with me, and Ralph and the residency. I think it really it honed in what I wanted to do, and really gave me the courage to proceed. And obviously it was meant to be, because it did happen quite quickly after the residency. It was really there was a springboard there that really carried me forward. So I think I'll just jump in and read an excerpt, and then perhaps we can just have questions and talk about it a little bit more. Just to put you in the scene, so Christine, the lead character, has just found herself outside of, so at the camp itself, there was the official refugee camp that was manned by the state, by the Greek state in this case. But because there was about 2,000 people coming us per day by boat, there wasn't enough manpower or infrastructure to kind of help these people. And so I found myself in an independent camp where we were trying to assist people and help people from the outside, let's say. And so here's Christine, just found herself outside of the camp. Jesus. I stepped out the car and threw my cigarette to the ground as I locked the car. The access to the camp was a steep tarmac road. From where we stood, there were hundreds of people making their way to the tip of the hill. Gold and silver hypothermia blankets dotted the crowd. The crippling sound they were making pierced right through me. Should I have closed my eyes? I could have sworn I was outside a stadium, making my way to the ticket box of a pop concert. But these people weren't making their way to any ticket box. They weren't buying just any ticket. They were buying tickets to their fate. Come on, let's go. I locked my arms with Ralph's and began to make moves towards the tent. It was freezing cold, dark, and humid. The problem is, explained Ralph, who was running short of breath, the two big cauldrons of soup just outside the tent are too close to the residents of the camp who are coming to get served. The mass is pushing forward, and I'm worried they're going to push the boiling hot cauldrons over, or that one of us is going to catch a light from one of the big gas hobs. We need to find a way to push them back, but you'll see, Christine, there's so many people. He paused as we pushed on through the crowd. Our arms unlocked with each other, they reunited again. We moved gracefully, but fast. Our conversation ceased and then started again on a couple of occasions. I've got an idea, Christine, and you're the only one who can help me right now. I felt the stress driving me forwards, that feeling of eagerness to deal with the situation, but I was doubtful as to how we were going to go about this. Maybe we could stretch a rope across the front of the cauldrons or something, like a dividing line that would separate them from the tent, I proposed off the tip of my head. We were now standing at the tip of the hill, looking down to where we could see the camp tucked away in the hill towards our right. We actually couldn't see the tent. It was hidden by an extended semicircle of people that had been formed around its entrance. A single faint light was shining from within the tent, the only indication of its presence. There's no time for that, Christine, snapped Ralph. Look, you're a woman, you can manage this, he said, grabbing me by the shoulders in a standstill. I looked at him in query. What did any of this have to do with the fact that I was a woman? I tried to step back, but he was holding me so tight I couldn't move. I need you to go and stand right at the entrance, just as you would if you were standing at the tip of a boat. I want you to stand tall and confident, and when you're ready, I want you to call out as loud as possible. Speak to the people. Are you listening? He asked me as I looked back and forth from his eyes to the tent. I don't understand what this has to do with the fact that I'm a woman. You speak to them. I released his hands from my shoulders. Christine, wait, hear me out. I'm really serious. Listen. He had raised his voice. In many ways, I wanted to throw it all back in his face and tell him that this was no way to talk to a woman. I would have said anything to get out of the situation, and blocking him with my womanhood felt like a good opportunity to deflect his wants. But he had caught my attention in his despair. You're a woman, and they'll respect you 1,000 times more than they would any man. I want you to stand there and tell them that you're a woman and demand that they form a line. Help them get in some kind of order. Trust me, Christine, I know this can work. A man will less likely lash out at a woman trying to feed him, and I'll be right behind you. He saw from my gaze in an attempt to figure out what I was thinking, how I would respond. Is this some kind of a joke? You want me to stand there and use my womanhood as bait? Whatever happened to gender equality and all that shit? Are you fucking kidding me? I shuffled on the spot, gaining grounds for what I thought was a feminist debate unrolling. Christine, calm down. We're not here to negotiate your womanhood. Listen! He was getting impatient, and I was obviously ignoring the urgency of the situation. I lifted my head up, took a deep breath, and scanned the people around me. All I could see was faces of disbelief. Jesus, Ralph, I eventually said. Come on, grab my hand. You'll be fine. We ran down the hill. In less than a couple of minutes, I found myself in front of dozens of hungry, cold, and desperate beings. With a cauldron on each side of me, I could see the danger Ralph was foreseeing. The force of the crowd was powerful and forthcoming. 2 volunteers, Peter and Ahmed, were handing out paper cups of soup, one by one, with hands coming at them from all sides. "Stand back," called Ahmed as he poured the soup into paper cups. "Stand back!" His words fell on deaf ears. Ralph came up behind me and in a very gentle voice, with his reassuring hands on my shoulder, pushed me forward and said, "You've got this, Christine. You can do it." It took me a couple of seconds before I realized I was holding my breath. "Breathe, Christine, breathe," I thought to myself. Standing at the edge of my comfort zone, I silently said, "I am a woman. Please stand in line." "Louder," encouraged Ralph from behind me. "I am a woman. Please stand in line," I repeated with a little bit more vocal power. "That's my girl. Now say it again, a little louder," Ralph insisted. As if my heart had broken, I took another deep breath. I thought of nothing as I shouted to the very best of my capabilities, "I am a woman! Please stand in line!" My call was met by a young Afghan's eyes. He looked straight at me and dropped his arms to the side of his body, as if telling me he was ready to take a lead. He turned to his right and said something in Dari to a man standing behind him. In turn, he moved behind him as he grabbed another man and pushed him behind him too. "Now follow that line," Ralph nudged me forward, "and keep on repeating the same thing. It's working. They'll follow your lead. Go, Christine, go." I stepped forward, bowing at the young Afghan. "I am a woman." I paused. "Please stand in line," I continued. And as I stepped on forward, a line of men was forming to the right of my shoulder. I continued walking up the hill as it all miraculously happened in front of my eyes. I couldn't believe my steps and I couldn't look back. I just carried on moving forward, calling out what had become some sort of mantra, a meditation that called me forward until I reached the top of the hill. Once at the tip, I hesitantly turned around and saw the lines of humans standing in front of my eyes. My eyes welled up. What had I done? I was astounded at what I had accomplished, how my presence had managed to goad people into action, and the result almost horrified me. Human lines recalled education, oppression, power. I wasn't one to impose my being or impose my wants, oblige people to do things. The only thought that soothed my conscience was the sensation of soup making its way down my throat, into my belly, into my well-being, a warmth I prayed would reach each and...
There you go.
Okay, here we go. I don't know if you managed, were you cut off at some point or did you hear the...
That last 20, 30 seconds.
Okay. Well, I gathered you got the the gist of the excerpt. I don't know whether you want to talk a little bit about it or if you would like me to read another excerpt from the book.
Oh, I think anything you want to do.
I have a question. Sorry, I was going to ask you something.
Yeah, go ahead.
So, Mellisa, how did you? Was it a transition? Was it a transformation? Was it just meant to happen? How did you go from a journalist, where I know, and you are a journalist seeking the truth, right? How did you go from a journalist, always fact-checking, seeking the truth, making sure that the narrative represents the voice of people who don't have a voice? How did you go from there to then pushing the boundaries of non-creative fiction?
Well, to be honest, I think it's the actual fact that I am, well, that I still am a journalist, and I mean, Melissa will know this, but I think one of the challenges was really to do that, to stir away from, reporting the facts and not bringing in your own opinions or not hindering any truths, by not or not revealing any truths by putting yourself in between that. And I think that's what naturally, I don't think it was intentional. I mean, initially I was looking to write something much more fictional. But I think it revealed itself very quickly that first and foremost, I don't think I was ready to kind of delve into a fully fledged fiction novel, because I was still attached to my journalistic background, but also because of the subject matter that I was dealing with. I think what led me to this genre is that I could really, this character Christine is somewhat of an alter ego of myself, and having her, you know, in the lead and the person that's delving all these realities, I felt safe, I think, to just say things as I intrinsically felt them and how I witnessed the whole situation. So she was kind of this shield, let's say, that I could use not to shy away from anything. Although I looking back, I think I could have pushed that much further, and perhaps if I had redrafted it a couple of times, I would have got there. And you know, this whole journey actually really made me realize what a freedom it is to write and just write what you think and just not care about, you know, who your audience is, you know, so many details, just by letting yourself do it and put it down on paper. And, I really, although I know it's kind of a subgenre, and people, I get a lot of people who get confused by it, because they particularly people perhaps who know me, and they say, well, you know, Christine, is she you? Is she not you? I mean, which part of her is you? And so I think it's definitely been a transition in the sense that I feel much more comfortable in shying away from you know, the newsworthiness and kind of the newsy language or the fact checking. But at the same time, this genre, I think, allowed me to, I mean, the facts in the book are very, very real. And I do kind of pinpoint realities that I feel are truthful. So I think it was really adequate for what I was trying to maneuver out there.
And I think you found the right balance, because you know, when you have a narrative, this is what I've appreciated through the residencies, you can move mountains through a good narrative. Like, for example, for us to take away the fear of refugees, divided communities, etc. But at the same time, then you also need to be factual. And I think you are, because your book resonates with embassies. You know, I see you've been invited by embassies and non-government organizations representing your book, because I think they recognize that as a non-government organization, maybe, yes, you are very factual in terms of lobbying, or maybe not, but lobbying politicians. But at the end of the day, when you have a good narrative, and I think we as, you know, the audience are maybe can be stronger than the politicians lobbying the non-government organizations trying to do the right thing or the wrong thing.
I think it's the humanitarian kind of, the human aspect to the story, which they kind of embrace and perhaps can't use in their daily languages or activities and things like that. So I think that's why, I mean, I did intentionally write it in a very kind of, I think it's a simple language. I think it's something that, I mean, it's a small book. It's nothing, I mean, it's a heavy subject, but I don't think it's a heavy book to read. And therefore, it has kind of managed to weep into various audiences who can really just get a glimpse. I mean, it's not there to kind of dictate anything or to, you know, spill out the entire story, but it is to give just a glimpse of you know, what people and what refugees are confronted with. And then there's, you know, there's coincidences. I mean, when the book was launched, it was launched a week before the camp in Greece burnt down. So I think there was that coincidence which really, I mean, it's kind of strange to say, but people were made aware of the book because of that, and that's how I managed to get NGOs and other kind of people interested in the book that I didn't envision, or I wasn't expecting. It's been a great journey, and I think the best. I think launching a book in a pandemic is kind of the wrong time, but at the same time it is the right time. I mean, we're online, we've all kind of adapted to that. I think what I'm missing the most is opportunities like this to share the book, really, and to create events where you can have a one-to-one with a reader or with someone and kind of really share more than just each reading in different corners and absorbing things for themselves. But hopefully, time given, we'll also be able to share it with a face-to-face audience.
Yes, well, I mean, the way it occurs to me is, I mean, you are represented by a very well-respected publisher, award-winning publisher. However, given that we all have to adapt, maybe now in the pandemic, publishers are becoming a bottleneck because they are not able to adapt as quickly as, for example, we can with smart festivals, where we can represent authors and you can reach out to your audience, because I know that ultimately your cause is not about yourself, it's about helping connecting refugees with communities and celebrating our differences, right? And
yeah. I mean, I think this is something we discuss with my publisher often, where there is a cause to this book. It's not just a book. There is a cause behind it that's very that's been alive for a very long time, that's very poignant at the moment, and that will continue to be so for a very long time. And so, my publisher also says to me, Melissa, you're actually speaking on behalf of the community, and so it's I mean, it's I love writing, and it's something that I want to continue doing, but I feel that this book in particular is a true responsibility, and I hope that I do justice to what I say and the interactions that I have with people that are involved in this community.
Thank you for that, Melissa. Thank you.
Something, Melissa, that I'd like to pick up on from reading your book. It comes across quite clear that the experiences you went through working with the refugees and the refugee camp and the authorities came up against, that on several occasions you were having to deal with conflicts within yourself.
Yes.
And I'm thinking about the time when you talk about leaving your daughter behind to go and help other strangers who you didn't know, and the guilt that you felt around that, I think. And also then when you leave the camp, the refugee camp, and you go back to the relative comfort of your own apartment, and you feel guilt about that. And then the other occasion that comes to mind is when you stop in the evening and offer to give a refugee family a lift to the camp, and then you stop by the police, and you really don't want to have to ask this family to leave the car, but then you feel forced to do that because you're not sure, I suppose, what the police may do to you and to them if you don't do that. And I'm just wondering how you dealt with that psychologically, that conflict.
I mean, it took me a long time to, as you say, gather myself on many different aspects, whether it was my family life, whether it was, the whole humanitarian cause of the world and where we're going, or whether it was to really grasp, the political aspect of things. And I mean, in all honesty, I think that experience is a huge part of who I am today, and did change me as a person. I'm not going to deny that. I mean, what I acknowledge and what I remind myself is that by going to Moria, by going to Greece at the time where, you know, the things were pretty bad, I didn't go as an experienced volunteer, and I didn't go with any kind of training or any kind of mechanisms to deal with things psychologically. So I give credit to myself for that, and I think that's one of the things that should have I gone with more experience, or perhaps with the experience that I have today, I would have experienced it differently. When I came back with a lot of anger, and with a lot of kind of, you know, this disparity, two different worlds, you know, seeing rock bottom and then seeing, you know, where, how, and fortunate we are to be living in different dimensions. But I think what was also important is that an experience like that is surely grounding. It also kind of gives you a notion of how fortunate you are, where you are, what you've been offered in life just by being born in a different country, in a different realm, in a different family, right? And so it took me time. It made me change. I became a freelancer. When I came back, I stopped working for a big media corporation. It just indicated me that, you know, I didn't want to be in mass production news anymore. And I definitely changed the way I live. You know, my life became smaller in many ways. And this book is also a testament to, I think it was a very nurturing process, and it did help me to kind of put a full stop to that whole process that I went through. I think it really unleashed a lot of my thoughts, and then it helped me to put it down on paper, and sharing it nowadays, I think is still that ongoing process of really just internalizing what goes on around the world, and giving you, you know, perspectives. I don't know, I think as a journalist, it really shocked me, where you realize, even now in the pandemic, you know, I think sometimes I speak to my brother who's in Brazil, and, you know, if you read the news about Brazil at the moment, it's horrendous. But actually, my brother's dancing salsa and drinking beers on beaches and on little islands in Brazil, you know. And so you think the media does seem to horn into the newsworthiness, the worst case scenario, you know, these kind of stories which will move you in one direction or another. And it really made me realize that actually, no, I don't want to tell those stories. I want to tell other stories which are as equally important and may perhaps bring you more by not by not being fear-mongering, and not, I say it a lot in the book. I talk a lot about the numbers that the media uses, you know, 10,000 people and 100,000 people dead. I mean, now with the pandemic, every single day we have numbers of people dying, of people being infected, of, you know, how many vaccines, numbers. And I think, you know, if you look at it in regards to the entire population, that number's not that big. I'm not saying that it's not an issue, but, you know, I think there's these ways of telling stories and using numbers and words that are super important to kind of pay attention to. Yeah.
Thank you.
Hey, Mellisa, I'm Vitor. It's really, I take my shot here because I'm really interested in your story that I heard about you when Ralph speak in the Smart Travel event last December. And I really felt that you were doing a great job telling these stories that people tend to interpret in the bias modes because of the media and especially from mainstream media, and of course all the stories that people are telling, sometimes they clash with the reality. So I am a former and disappointed journalist also. I did journalism for 20 years, and I perfectly understand your point of view. When you start fact checking and your boss says we keep the narrative because it doesn't matter if it's true or not. The matter is that we cannot support economically if we go against this route, or we get out of the track of the power of our sponsors or our politicians or whatever. So I got disappointed, and so I left also journalism for that purpose. But what really amazed me, and I'm listening all morning. I just took like 1 or 2 minutes now to introduce some some cross topics about. We already heard in the morning Rosie and Addy about creativity and how what sparks in each one of us creativity. And the most amazing story that I heard about smart cities, for example, was from the nominated mayor of one refugee camp in Jordan in 2014 with Syrians. Those mayors, they absolutely can do nothing against 30,000 people or 40,000 people or 60,000, 65,000 people. The camp, I believe, is Zahata. I don't know how to spell it. But then he was telling, we start with a perfect city in the desert. Everything is perfect. Tents, water supply, energy, everything is amazing. We prepare the United Nations or the ONGs or whatever, they prepare everything like a scratch, made in some towers in New York or Washington or far away. And those bureaucrats, they understand the world in a totally different way than the people in the soil, in the living experience. They cannot face it. So when I saw what he's telling about the most impressive smart city, that's inspired me also for an alternative way of smart city is when you have a problem, you find creative ways to solve it. So when you see this happening in a true way, as the experience he commented in New York Times conference in 2014, which I had the pleasure to be there also. He explained that we couldn't stop people just to change the tents from one way to another, or move the electricity to another place, or exchange rooms because one family has 3 people, the other has 10 people. So they have to adapt in a creative way, and they found themselves a routine, and in that chaos they found their own order. And this is something that people don't understand often when they are challenging, when they have hard times, and then everyone has a solution for everything. But when it happens to us, we need to find our own solutions. So I think that what you are experiencing with your writing and with your testimony. I'm living in Greece, and I already have I had an idea about what was happening in Greece before I come here. Now I'm changing my mind because I see that with the pandemic, for example, there's a lot of children out of school because of racism or some kind of this is not new. It happened in history with the Black Death, with the big pandemics. So they try to blame someone, and they try to get away people for that has less conditions, hygiene conditions, or whatever. They think they transmit the disease in a more infectious way. So I think that what this is important to. What I want to say is that it's so amazing that we can cross in this event. That Ralph, you cannot speak about me anymore about this event. This is all your work. This is your masterpiece right now. It's like we are just listening and learning with each other, and this is amazing. But I want to cross this message, and I want to hear a comment with the creative process from one side, and about writing a book about refugees and their own crossing with the refugees' own experience, also in their own way of creation and creating their own lives. This is what brings so much harmony, interest in the world. I don't know. I want to hear your thoughts about it.
I mean, as you were talking, there was all these moments on camp where, you know, there was a lot of work that stemmed from once we grasped that, you know, we were there to help, but we had a manpower and a community that was there, that had endless time to do things and, you know, speak, create and whatnot. And once we began to work together, whether that was, you know, to collect the hypothermia blankets, hang up wet clothes, create fires, create soup kitchens, you know, do a children's tent for the kids so that the parents could have a rest, you know. So once we started this creation of a camp, it was phenomenal how much the allure changed and how we came together, and we really managed, I think, by the end of it to create a community. And I see it often in different camps. I mean, whether that was, I've seen it in Rome when I went to the Roma camp in Rome. I saw it in Brussels. I saw it here in Cyprus. Is when you have one or two or three creative people who are willing or not willing, but who have the spark to bring a creative solution to something, it makes such a difference. And there's an example that comes to mind here in Cyprus, in Gofino. There's a wonderful man he's been working in the camp for about 2 years now. He's been managing it. And so this camp is not a permanent camp, but there's about 200 people living there by choice, and they're waiting for their papers, right? They're asylum seekers, they're waiting for their papers, and the papers that they're waiting for is for their interviews with the asylum services or the Ministry of Interior Affairs and whatnot, so that they can proceed their process forward. And this camp is porta cabins, so it's not tents, but it's little porta cabins. And there's I'd say about 50 porta cabins on location. And for years, the postman would come to the camp and just throw the paperwork on the floor. And every morning you would have fighting, people losing letters getting wet, unreadable, blah, blah. This guy comes into the camp, starts managing the space, and he decides, right, I'm going to put a post box on each of these porta cabins, and 4 post boxes on each, because there's 4 rooms in the porta cabin. And he solves a problem within a day. He goes and finds the postman, teaches the postman, look, this is number 1, A, B, and explains to this guy. Within a week, there was such a difference in attitude to the residents of the camp, because finally they could get their posts. There was no fighting. There was, you know, this structure. And as you say, it's nothing huge, but this person thought, created, how am I going to solve this problem, you know? And I find it, the lack of knowledge and sometimes, or experience, really does create hindrances. I mean, I remember going to a house of refugees here in Cyprus who had just received lots of donations for their kitchens, with toasters, with microwaves. I mean, they were fully equipped kitchen, right? But these guys have never used any of this thing. And so I'm showing them how to use the toaster. Once the toast pops up, they all jump back. You know, it's like, what's happening? So, I mean, there's so many, a lot of people ask me, you know, well, how do we help? How do we help? You know, you've been there, you know a little bit about things. And sometimes I say, well, actually, if you just walk out your door and you speak to people and you just have a look, you know, you don't need to really invest huge amounts of money or give them everything that you don't need, or go, you know, up the ladders to NGOs and change laws and kind of address. Of course, you need that too, change policies and all that. But on a human level, there's so much you can do. It's just you need perhaps someone to tell you that, or just to remind you, you know, these are, we're talking about people. They like people asking, you know, saying good morning in the morning, and break those, you know, cultural racism barriers and all this stuff. So I think, I mean, my God, it's such a huge topic, but I think in order for cities to be smart, the people within it have to be aware and sensitized. And I think that's, I mean, slowly, that's definitely an area that I'm not as hands-on as I used to be, going to camps or, you know, really bringing people into my home or feeding or clothing. I've kind of slowed down on that, but I've turned towards raising awareness or, you know, providing either intellectual tools or mentorship to the community itself. And I think that can make radical changes at the same time, you know.
I think there's one point in the book where, again, it's this conflict that you're having when you were out there and probably before you went and since you've come back, that you felt you weren't doing enough, you should be doing more. And one character, I can't remember who it was, at what point in the book, says to you, you know, if you felt one person, then you've done enough. Just the fact you felt one, when other people have walked past and done nothing.
Yeah, and I think it goes a long way. It's true. If each and every one of us helped one person or took one person in, we would not have a problem. You know, I mean, there's, so I think, yeah, I mean, initially I did think, okay, I'm going to Lesbos, I'm going to change the world, you know, I went with big aspirations, but I think nowadays I'm quite comfortable with, I mean, I have an additional 4 children that I'm committed to full time. And I think, yeah, that's more than enough. And on top of that, if on my way, as things happen that way, then I will. But I think, yeah, helping one person is more than enough. It can go a long way. That's what I'm saying. If you change one person's lives, I think it says, I mean, it's a life, right?
Absolutely, yeah.
Okay, so am I on mute or unmute?
We
We
can
can
hear
hear you.
You've just now muted yourself again, I think, Ralph.
Okay. Mellisa, I think we have to change the format of the festival. I think there are sessions in the festival which work very well for 30 minutes. This session we should have scheduled for 60 minutes. But you know, Mel was saying we're running over time, yes, and of course, but we both felt that we have to keep this going because sometimes magic happens in the festival, and then you know we can't kill the magic. So thank you very much for sharing yourself.
Thank you for having me.
And Amir, sharing Amir and his blue elephant. And so we will now take it, well, I think we'll take a quick break, give Mel also a bit of breathing space, and then we will travel to Kenya to the next author. So Mellisa, thank you very much.
Thank you, and thank you for the festival. It's really engaging to have such different walks of lives and different you know, backgrounds, and honestly, it's been 2 pleasurable days at home by the fire with you in the background. It's bravo.
Well, we're all walking together. There is a saying of my favorite author. He says, "Don't walk behind me. Don't expect me to lead. Don't walk ahead of me. Don't expect me to follow. Just walk beside me and be my friend."
Agreed.
So on